Well folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage Channel. I'm Todd Kessner. We're back out here at the range outside of Bozeman, Montana, and we're going to do some experiments with the 1860 Army. So if you happen to have watched the 1851 Navy video, then you'll kind of know what's coming here. We're gonna test this gun with 3 different projectiles, or at least 3 different methods in loading the projectiles. We've got the round ball, so I've got a 4.54 round lead ball, and we'll load that over 30 grains of old Einsford 3F powder. I've got the Johnson & Dow conical bullet as well, and we'll load this over loose powder, and then we'll finish up. I've got the Johnson & Dow bullet hooked to a paper cartridge, and so it's kind of a self-contained bullet here with powder and shot together. So we'll take a look at all 3 of these, see which one we like the best, and kind of determine what the future favorite projectile for this particular gun is. So the 1860 Army revolver really came about because of a huge improvement in steel, and so the previous 44 caliber Colt revolvers were much larger, would have been termed really a horse pistol rather than a holster pistol, and a horse pistol being one that was big enough and heavy enough it was uncomfortable to carry on your person all the time, so you'd have it usually in a pommel holster or have 2 of them, one on either side of the saddle, and that's where the term horse pistol came from. But with an improvement in steel, Colt could manufacture a 44 caliber revolver that nearly had the power of the bigger Walker and Dragoons, but was much easier to handle as a sidearm. And so a lot of that came with the improvement of steel and being able to trim this down and still be able to have the gun and the materials able to hold the pressure of a 44 caliber gun. And it's kind of interesting how it came to its final form. The 1851 Navy was such a popular revolver, and at first the folks at Colt were trying to make a 44 and scale it down from the Walker and Dragoon, and nothing was seeming to work correctly, the balance, just the whole machining, and finally took basically the 1851 Navy frame, put a different little ledge on it under the cylinder, bumped out the cylinder on the front from a 36 caliber cylinder out to a 44 caliber cylinder on the front anyway, to hold that bullet, and kind of an odd cylinder shape on the inside, or a chamber shape on the inside. Somewhat it tapers back, but we're able to get a nice balanced revolver from the 1851 design rather than trying to shrink down or reduce the design of the Walker and Dragoons. So a lot of folks, their favorite would be the 1860 Army, depending on what you like and who you are, because of the sleekness of the barrel. Everything's rounded, it's not octagonal and square and things, and so it's kind of a toss-up for me actually. I like the octagonal barrel in the 51 Navy. I like the balance. I like everything about that gun, and I've got nothing bad to say about an 1860 Army either. So I guess it just depends on who you are and what you like, or me. You can enjoy either one of them. So we're going to go ahead and load this up with 30 grains of 3F old Einsford, and round ball, 4.54 round ball. We'll throw 6 shots at the target, see what kind of grouping we get, and then we'll compare that to our Johnson & Dow Civil War era historically correct bullet. It's 217 grains from years gone bullet molds, and then the same bullet only in a paper cartridge, the same Johnson & Dow 217 grain conical with a paper cartridge. So let's give this a try. I'll start loading this gun up. So if you watched the 1851 Navy video, you would have seen the loading sequence. If you didn't watch that video, I'm going to go over it very quickly this time as well, just so that we've stayed consistent. So I've got my 3F old Einsford powder in my flask. I've got a powder measure with set at 30 grains. So I'm going to take it from this flask into my powder measure, and the reason I'm doing this first time around that you load a gun, cap and ball revolver, it really may not make all that much difference if you use a powder measure or you come right out of the flask. I'm in the habit of coming right out of or using the powder measure, not coming out of a flask, primarily because if I have if I'm reloading and I've got any kind of a ember down in there and something goes off, and if it goes off and you're using this powder spout right here as your measure and you're dumping right from your flask, and that thing goes off, you're holding on to a hand grenade and you're going to do yourself a lot of harm. And so I really urge you never to skip the step of using the powder measure. If there's an ember burning down inside of here and my powder measure goes off, I've got 30 grains that are going off and going to burn me pretty good, but I'm not going to lose any fingers. So I would urge you not to skip that step and of using your powder measure. So I'm going to load up all 6 of these, and if you're a Western action shooter of any kind, you're probably used to loading 5, and we could do that, but I'm going to load it the historically correct way, which would be 6 rounds, and then there's safety pins between each of the chambers on the back of the cylinder, and a notch that is in the hammer, and I can drop that hammer right over the top of one of those safety pins in the back of the cylinder, and have all 6 loaded safely. And the advantage of having a cap and ball revolver back in the period was that you had 6 rounds, and so I'm going to load 6 rounds. To have loaded 5 and dropped your hammer down on the empty would have taken a shot away from you, and you can see by this loading process that losing a shot would have been detrimental if you needed that shot. You're not going to reload this gun fast enough to really use a second cylinder full or even another shot or 2. So I'm going to finish this up, got a couple to go, and we'll come back and talk about the lube a little bit. So I'm taking some beeswax and some other concoction for bullet lube, same as what we use when we dip bullets and pan lubed in the lubing video, and I'm putting it over the end of each chamber because we've got 30 grains of black powder down inside in a round ball, 454 round ball sitting on top, and we don't have any lubrication. And so if you've used black powder, you know how chalky the fouling can get, and so we're going to have these chambers covered with some bullet lube. That'll help keep the fouling soft and also helps prevent any kind of chain fire from the front. And so this will seal off the ends of the chamber. The only time that you get a chain fire from the front, and I mentioned this before in past video, is if the piece of machinery drilling the hole for this chamber into this cylinder, the drill bit walked a little bit and wobbled as it was going down drilling that hole, and you have a hole that's a little bit out of round. And if that happens and you don't have a large enough bullet or projectile, ball or whatever it is, you could have a little bit of space between the edge of the lead ball and the cylinder wall, and if that happens, there's potentially a fire that can get back there and have a chain fire. And if you have a large enough ball and you will shave off a ring of lead all the way around it, and if you're doing that, you can, if that ring of lead is complete, you'll know that that ball is touching the wall and all the way around. So really most chain fires, at least in my experience and my experience with other folks, most chain fires come from the rear with a loose fitting cap more so than from the front. But this lubrication in the front is certainly worth putting in, even if you're not so worried about chain fire, but just wanting to have this well lubed as we shoot round ball. And then if you want to shoot another cylinder full, you haven't chalked up the barrel so bad with hard fouling that you can't make the gun work. So that's part of the rationale for lube. When we get to the Johnson & Dow bullet, I've got lubrication in the grease grooves already, so we won't bother with it. So I'm going to put on the percussion caps, and we'll throw 6 rounds downrange into a steel target, see what kind of a group that we get down there. and then try some of these other bullets. All right, we're loaded and capped, so let's fire 6 rounds downrange and see what we've got. Well, once I got my point of aim figured out here, I kind of end up on the target. The first 2 went, I think, right over the top, and then hit the bottom of the target, and then figured it out. So, not a great group, but I finally figured out my point of aim. These things shoot notoriously high. It's the first time with this load, and so once I got to where I was aiming below the target and started hitting that steel, at least it started hitting the steel. So not a great group. That's 30 grains of old Einsford 3F, and I could have fit quite a bit more in that each chamber. There's room for it, but I wanted to compare it to the same load as the paper cartridges and with the conical bullet. You can't put as much powder inside of the chamber if you're going to use a conical bullet, because the bullet's longer and you're going to need to have room to fit that bullet in there as well. So we'll try that next and see if we are a little bit more at point of aim and see what kind of a group we get there. All right, we're about ready to get started here, loading her up for test number 2. So I stuck with the 30 grains. We're going to do loose powder and the 217 grain, excuse me, Johnson & Dow bullet. So handy thing about the historically correct bullets is they've got a little heel on the bottom, which is a little area where the diameter is reduced enough to fit down into the top of the chamber. So I've been able to put in my 30 grains of powder, and if we zoom in on this part right in here, you'll see that the bullet is seated and centered under the ramming or loading lever and rammer. And I'm going to do a little bit deeper. There we go. And I'm going to rely on the lube that is already on this particular bullet. That's because we've pan lubed these, and it's got a lube groove in it. So we're going to go ahead and let that do its work and not put more lubrication over the top. All right, so I got my 6 conicals loaded over 30 grains of powder, and I'll tell you what, 30 grains by volume, and that's about all this thing will take with a conical bullet, at least this Johnson & Dow. Much more, and my bullet would be coming out the end of the cylinder, make it very difficult to turn the cylinder. So each chamber would have a bullet sticking out of it. So I would really have to compress a lot in order to get more than 30 grains. So my official spotter on the last round said that my first 2 shots actually went under the target. I was expecting the gun to shoot high, because they always do, it seems like, and so I held a little low. Apparently I held too low, so instead of going over the top as I was suspecting, they actually went underneath. So I'm going to try a point of aim right at the bottom of the circle, and we'll see where they go with these Johnson & Dow conicals. right, well those all at least hit the steel. I had a couple of misfires there, and I thought for a second I had a cap jam, which is when you pull the hammer back, your cap will go between the frame of the pistol and the hammer, and then your hammer won't reach the cap on the next chamber. That was not the case. Apparently just those two caps needed to be driven down once, and I hit them again, and they went off. So I'm on steel with this load. A little wild, the one real high one. So yeah, not real impressed so far with the accuracy. So we'll have to play around with that and see if we can do a little bit better. But I'm going to go ahead like I did last time. I'm going to put a swab down the barrel. So I've got an equal test, and then we're going to load up our paper cartridges and see how they do. I'm going to load up 6 of these paper cartridges. You'll see it's already got lube on it, and we had dipped these. If you watch the lubing bullets video, dip these in the Vigilante bullet lube, and so they're ready to go. They're lubed as well. What I was afraid of is actually happened. I'm trying to load this paper cartridge into the gun with the gun assembled, and one thing that if you watched any other videos on paper cartridges, this is very common in a reproduction. They don't give you enough room to be able to drop a paper cartridge in. You know, when you're making a reproduction, you don't always think of everything, and so you could drop a conical in and load it, but you can't drop a conical attached to a paper cartridge down in here and load it. So I'm going to have to pull this apart and put it on a separate loading stand, and then load it off of the revolver in order to be able to get that paper cartridge down there and the bullet loaded. There are ways to alter your 1860 Army so that this opening is enlarged and you're able to get that bullet in there loaded on the gun. And actually Mike Bellevue on Duelist 1954 has got a really good video on using a Dremel tool and opening that up. He's pretty talented with the Dremel tool. I haven't had enough confidence to give that a try, but you can open up this area here where the bullet goes in and solve this problem by grinding some steel off and re-bluing it. But I'm going to take the gun apart. We're going to use a very inauthentic loading stand, and we'll get these guys loaded up and see what we do with our paper cartridge. Well, the manufacturer of this bullet stand, this loader, didn't do me any favors. The plunger doesn't line up properly with the chamber, and so as I was trying to get the conical in there with the thing not lining up straight down with the chamber, it just rolled the bullet over and made an absolute mess. And so I've had to basically whittle off the front of the bullet in order to make that one go. I'm gonna have to shoot that one first because it's oddly positioned, so this is going to be a tough test. So having the loading stand not working, the other alternative I've got is I'm going to have to one by one place these bullets, paper cartridge, down into my gun, put my gun back together, and then use the gun's loading lever one at a time. Unfortunately, I've got to take the cylinder off of the gun every time to get the paper cartridge down there, but at least, there we go, that method is working, and I'm able to load this gun at least for the test. Definitely are going to play around with the idea of finding a better loading stand that works properly the way it's advertised, and be able to load conicals. But for today, we're going to be able to get these down in here one at a time, using the gun itself, just taking it apart every time, throw the caps on, and we'll go from there. Well, with the loading fiasco of these paper cartridges, this accuracy test here is going to be dubious at best, but we'll give it a try. I got them loaded, the cylinder's turning, and we're going to shoot that really odd one first that went in a little crooked, and the rest of them are at least pointed straight out the barrel. So let's see what happens. Obviously got some work to do with this gun to streamline this process, but we'll shoot what we've loaded, and just for interest's sake, we'll just see what we get. Well, surprisingly, the very worst bullet that got loaded kind of cockeyed and had to be trimmed with my jackknife hit almost dead center on the target, and had another misfire problem. And it wasn't a cap jam again. It was just the hammer not hitting hard enough to have that cap go off. So yeah, I got some issues with this gun, more so than definitely the 51 Navy that I've shot a lot. So I got some work to do with this. I'm hitting steel. Can work on some loads. I think I'm going to have to back off of 30 grains a little bit for the paper cartridges anyway, because it's very difficult to get those in there, because we're not just taking space with powder and bullet, we're taking space with the paper as well. And so trying to get that down inside that chamber far enough that the bullet's not protruding out of the end of the cylinder has been a little bit difficult. So I got to play around a little bit with that, get a better bullet seater, and see what's going on with those two chambers that continue to misfire. So well, that's what we got, at least for today. Got a place to go from here. So thank you for coming. If you like the video, hit like and subscribe as well. It helps us out a lot. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time on Frontier Western Heritage. Hello folks, welcome back to the, forgot the name of the channel.
Frontier Western Heritage. You're Todd Kessler.
I know. Golly. Okay, you got it?
Yeah. Should make a compilation saying, are we going?
That would be fun. Yeah. Okay.
We are in fact going.
Okay. Well, the paper cartridge has already been made. Oops.